it's way too early to talk about football season. What we're 200 and something days away, so we're going to do it anyway. The way too early rankings are out for from a bunch of different publications for the 2025 college football season. Michigan shows up in 9 of the 10 that I looked at online. More have come out since then, and Michigan has appeared on some more, but they're in the top 25 in 9 of the 10. They are as high as 12. They are as low as 25 in some of them. I'll read off the 9 different ones that placed Michigan in the top 25. On 3, Andy Staples and Ari Wasserman, our coworkers over there, put Michigan at number 12. Fox Sports also has Michigan at number 12. Action Network has Michigan at 17th. Sporting News has them at 18th. Bleacher Report also at 18th. ESPN.com at 21st. Athlon Sports, number 22. NCAA.com, number 23. And Yahoo Sports puts Michigan in barely at number 25. You're seeing a lot of love right now for Ohio State coming off the national championship. A lot of love for Texas, Penn State, Oregon, Notre Dame. I feel like we do sometimes fall in the trap of, okay, team made the national title game or whatever. They're not going anywhere. They're going to be here to stay. And they probably will be. But, again, it's just way too early to do this. Probably need some more time to see what these rosters are going to look like, separate some of the emotion from the end of the college football season. But it's fun nonetheless. And a lot of people expecting Michigan to take a step forward this season and maybe not be in the college football playoff. Again, things could change, but at least compete to be there.
They should compete to be there. You look at the schedule next year, and it is a lot more forgiving than this year's schedule was. Now, again, you've still got your fair share of questions. How much better is the offensive line going to be? How do you rebound from your best player on offense and arguably your 3 best players on defense heading to the NFL? To me, I think that the Michigan team that we watched this year finished this season as, I forget what the AP poll said. I think maybe they were in the receiving votes category. But when you look at the wins they had to end the year, I think you can make the case they were one of the best 25 teams in the country by the end of this season. So to build off that, especially, we kind of got a sneak peek at what life after Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Will Johnson, all that was going to look like in that bowl game. You completely revamp the offense. You completely revamp your quarterback room. You make a big NIL investment in a guy like Justice Haynes to round out your running back rotation. I could see a path to them being, obviously in the top 25. Certainly, I think pushing for a spot in that 12-team playoff next year. And I think that's going to right now, to me, that's the expectation. If you ask me, what do you need to see from this program in year 2 under Sherrone Moore? I think if you're not in that 12-team playoff, I think you need to find yourself in the conversation for it and maybe be one of those teams that, we're shaking our fist at the sky that they didn't get in at the end of the year due to the committee ranking the way that they do. So for me, I think that there's enough there to feel good about, at least from a stability perspective. Like, I think the floor is much higher for next year's team than this year's was. However, I think that there's still a lot to work out in spring ball. There's that spring portal period. I don't know how much better they are in some of those key areas. We look at the offensive line, look at wide receiver. So that's what makes me hesitant to maybe say, oh, this is clearly a top 15 team. It's clearly a team that is in the 12-team playoff next year. I think there are data points that could swing in either direction that either gets them in or just barely keeps them out. But right now I feel pretty good about where they're at.
Yeah, I feel like, not that this matters all that much, but I feel like there hasn't been much of an argument from Michigan fans seeing, okay, 12th or even 25th, right, in some of these. Because, one, it's so unpredictable at this point. Michigan fans just went through that, where looking back at the way too early rankings from last season that came out the day after Michigan won the national championship, Michigan was top 6 in like the 6 or 7 that we rounded up at that time. They were number 2 in multiple of them. Of course, at the time, Jim Harbaugh was the head coach. J.J. McCarthy was, still had a decision to make. Later that week, he ended up declaring for the NFL draft. But, I think a lot of people at the time of those rankings kind of knew where some of those things were going to go. JJ McCarthy likely to go to the NFL, that sort of thing. Jim Harbaugh receiving interest from NFL teams. At the same time, January 20th is later. That's when the national title game was played. There's more clarity on some of the rosters of these teams with the transfer portal. Dust kind of settling a little bit from this past cycle. There'll be more movement in the spring. So maybe it's more accurate. Not really sure. It doesn't really matter. No one really holds these people accountable who come out with these, but it drives some conversation. I will say the thing that annoys me the most about these, and I know I've talked about it in the past, even in August when you see some of these preseason rankings come out, a lot of people, they don't give us the exact criteria. Some of them will use schedule as like, hey, I'm predicting what the order of finish is going to be. And some people are like, hey, these are just the top 25 teams. You could be the number one team in the country and play, every other top 10 team, and you may finish number 12 in the rankings or something because you lost 3 or 4 games, and maybe you'd even be lower. But if you factor in schedule, like you said, Michigan could be the number 12 team in the country and has a pretty favorable schedule. Again, we have to see what some of these other teams look like and get into the college football playoff. So I'm not sure if it's order of finish or who's the best team. I'm not sure they know at this point some of the people ranking them. I will say, I know Andy and Ari from On3, have gone super in depth on this and done multiple podcasts on it. So, I know they've done a ton of research. I know that when they released their top 10 a couple of weeks ago, Brett Bielema tweeted at them and said, hey, put Illinois in. And they did in their next rendition of it. And then they had Bielema on the show today on Thursday. So go check that out. You talk about a coach that is pretty much seeing everything out there. So Illinois is expected to be good. Indiana, people are kind of throwing them in there again as a team that could compete. But Michigan played 3 out of the top 4 teams in the final AP poll this year. They get Ohio State this year, but they're not going to play Oregon. They don't play Penn State again. They don't play Texas again. I think by nature of the schedule, things could look a lot better, look a lot more smooth. You go through less speed bumps. Maybe you're able to improve throughout the course of the year against, less difficult teams, and that could help you out.
It could. The flip side to that is there someone on this year's schedule that could be, you look at, we can look at it now and say, oh, it looks a lot more forgiving. It looks
sure
a little more manageable, but is there someone on this schedule that is next year's Indiana? Like, I'm not saying this is the case or not, but is Oklahoma a team that stabilizes and is one of those best, 5 or 6 teams in the country, given the changes they made? Is Nebraska finally going to figure out? Is a team like Washington, who's brought in some big names via the portal, and I think Jed Fish is a very good coach, like, are they someone that could take a leap? So there's a lot of those types of variables there. But we know when it comes to Michigan, I think that it's hard for me to not play, when the schedule game is interesting because, now you're seeing this shift where the Big Ten is, I think the Big Ten is obviously, when you look at the last 2 national champions, it is the kind of at the forefront of the sport right now. And I think the top of the Big Ten, those top 4 teams, top maybe 5 teams next year, I think that's better. They're better than what those top 3 or 4 or 5 teams are in the SEC. So is it going to start becoming a case where, you start getting, there's the Big Ten bias. We always talk about the SEC bias and how they rank teams. 3 losses for Michigan could have them right in the mix for a playoff spot next year. So, again, it really just comes down to, it's not just we have a pretty good idea of what Michigan's going to be. I don't know that anything that they add in the portal is going to, I think it will be more along the lines of rounding out those particular rooms in terms of, oh gosh, well, they just brought in a bona fide day 1 starter at offensive tackle, or they just brought in easily the guy that'll be their number 1 wide receiver. I think that it'll kind of be in the vein that they have been in terms of guys that round out depth, your Amir Halls of the world, your Josh Wallace's of the world. And those additions have worked out pretty well for them. But other than that, I don't know that a whole lot is going to, a whole lot can be done now to change how I view next year's team. I think you're looking at a group that has a chance to go 10-2. could go 9-3. I think any less than that would be pretty disappointing. But to me, still a lot to figure out until we say, all right, clearly a playoff team or clearly a team on the verge of the playoff. I think we're just way too many unknowns across the sport.